Hi everyone, thanks for joining us today. My name is Nicholas and I work with liv.rent. We're an online rental platform that streamlines the entire rental process for tenants and for landlords. Pretty much our motto is rentals made easy. So how do we do this? Renters can search through verified listings for their next home, send digital applications, sign digital standard residential tenancy agreements, and also pay their rent online. We also have a patented credit check called the Liv score, which gives tenants and landlords a very good picture of their financials. So landlords can pick tenants easier, and tenants can provide a detailed background for them, for landlords, so they can get their rental unit faster and also more efficient. liv.rent was established in August 2018. Currently, we have over 30 plus employees. We have over 20,000 registered users in British Columbia and roughly around 200,000 page views. We are making a strong push and expansion into Toronto, and one of the realtors that have been guiding me through our transition and giving me insights to the Toronto market has been Elena. And without further ado, I would like to introduce you guys, the audience, to Elena.
Hi everyone, I'm Elena Saradidis. Thank you so much for the introduction, Nick. I work at Brad J. Lamb Realty. We're one of the most competitive brokerages in the city. I would say I'm a top producing agent here, and I've set records when it comes to rentals. So I'm excited to be on the call and hear a little bit more about what the stats you're going to provide for us.
That is perfect. So today's webinar, again, is on the Toronto rental market. For the first half, we'll be revealing key insights from 2020. Then for the remaining half, we'll talk about some of our 2021 predictions. So let's move forward. Okay, so before we start, I just wanted to have a quick look into our audience based on our registration surveys. So let's see. Our pie charts. Hold on 1 second. Are you a renter, landlord, property manager, or realtor? So 38.46% of you guys are renters, 30.77% are realtors, 11% is property managers, and 19% are landlords. So that's actually a very diverse crowd listening in, so that's very interesting. And remember, if you guys have feedback or chats, you guys can definitely chat with our live chat on the side. And I would like to also make note that there are 3 chances to take away a $100 Visa gift card. There will be 3 winners. How to enter? Please navigate to the giveaway panel on the right side of this live stream. Complete the specified actions to be entered into our draw. For every completed action is an additional raffle entry. That's right, you guys can win up to 5 entries in our raffle draw. So once you complete the actions, don't forget to click the submit entry button, and then once you're done your action. All right, before we dive into our key insights for 2020, we want to know what you think. So which major Canadian experienced the most drastic drop in rental prices in 2020? All right. Elena, what do you think on this?
Honestly, I think without a doubt, it's Toronto. There's definitely reason behind it. A lot of people that live in the city and are renting in the city are from outside of the province or outside of the downtown core. Now, once COVID did hit, a lot of people turned to work from home. So if you were renting in the city and you were paying an insane amount for rent, why would you continue to rent in downtown Toronto if your new policy is work from home? So a lot of people did migrate out of the downtown core.
Very interesting. Okay, so moving forward, our first insight today, moving forward to our first insight, Toronto definitely saw the biggest percentage in drop in rental prices compared to other major Canadian cities. Based on the one-bedroom data that we've acquired, unfurnished rentals, there has been a 3.3 decrease in Toronto as compared to a 1.4 decrease in Vancouver and another 1% decrease in Montreal. So definitely looking at these statistics, Toronto took the biggest hit. As for furnished rentals, there was a 13.1% decrease in the Toronto rental market as opposed to a 4.6 decrease in Montreal and a 2.4% decrease in Vancouver. What do you think about this, Elena?
So what I would say is, first we have to look at who are the people that are actually looking to rent furnished rentals. The majority of the people that are looking for those are people that are coming in, they're usually execs flying into Toronto 3 to 4 times a week, and they want a furnished place. They don't want to worry about having to get furniture. They're only here a few days a week. They're okay to pay a premium if it means they don't have to pay for their own furniture. If they're work from home and don't travel anymore, why would they need a place in Toronto? So all of those companies, and a lot of companies do rentals for a bunch of furnished places. I know I do it for myself as well. I have a couple of furnished places that I rent to companies. Those people went back. They're not here right now. So definitely furnished rentals took a hit. Now, in general, a lot of people that are doing furnished, that are looking for rentals, they don't primarily look for something furnished. The population that looks for furnished is a lot less, and especially due to COVID, why would they go look for something furnished where someone else has lived in it when they can get a place that has no furniture and they get their own? So that's definitely contributed to that as well.
Oh, that's perfect. Well, obviously 2020 has been a tumultuous year, and a lot of changes have occurred in the rental market, not only in Toronto but in Vancouver. So it's been crazy. So before we start our next insight, I wanted to start a poll, and our poll question is: where do you get your rental news and insights from? And how do you stay up to date on rental averages and the latest rental news? Once you complete your poll, we will reveal the poll results later on. And all right, next we're going on to our second insight. Our second insight is all areas across the GTA saw a drop in rental prices compared to 2019. 2019 average rent across GTA, one bed furnished and unfurnished, was approximately $1,997, so just shy of $2K. And 2020 average rent across GTA one bedroom was around $1,826. So a percentage change was minus 8.6%. Furnished apartments saw a bigger drop compared to unfurnished apartments, and it was around minus 15.8%. Why do you think this occurred, Elena?
So there's a couple of factors. One of the big pushes was COVID. COVID sparked a lot of people, again, work from home, so they didn't really need to rent in the city or in surrounding areas. They could afford to go back home. That increased the amount of supply to the market. Now, along with that, you also saw Airbnb was kind of stopped in the city. So for a little while, a lot of buildings completely banned it, which means anyone that was trying to Airbnb their units flipped their property onto the long-term rental scene, which also increased the amount of supply to the market. And then what some people are not talking about right now is the fact that a bunch of developers finished their projects all around the exact same time where COVID hit, which is definitely poor timing, but it also increased the amount of supply. So if we have a bunch of supply right now and not a lot of demand, what happens? The prices go down. So that's definitely what we've been seeing so far. I would say if you're reading this and you're not from Toronto or from the GTA, know that the number for 1997 is more of a broad term. We're collecting data from all over the place, not just in the downtown core, because I would say the average rental in the downtown core is around $2,300 for a one-bedroom pre-COVID. And now you can find them for about $1,800. It's definitely have taken a hit.
Wow, that's actually even a bigger drop then, from 23 to 18. Oh, all right. So before we move on to our next insight, our poll results have come in. So 83% of the audience have voted liv.rent monthly rent report. Oh, that's great. And other suggestions or other results have shown that Toronto Regional Real Estate Board. All right, so that's perfect. So just a little about Liv Rent. We do provide monthly rent reports as well as on our, when you sign on to our platform, on your dashboard, it definitely gives you a breakdown of your rental properties as compared to other rental properties in the area, and especially what's the price difference and what's the average price of the rental units in your area, so you can make a great decision on how to price your property. So these market insights are there to provide landlords with the information they require to successfully rent out their property more efficiently and more quickly. All right, on to our third insight. Rental prices in downtown core have seen a steady decline. Furnished rentals have seen a steady decline in rental prices starting in March, so onset of COVID, just like Elena has said. There's been a slight increase in July and August, possibly due to higher volumes of renting, and unfurnished rentals have seen a decline from July and onwards, with December seeing the highest decline. Are you supportive of the furnished or unfurnished, and what? Oh, sorry. No. So why do you think there was a decline in rental prices in March and then a slight increase in July and August?
So what's been going on in Toronto, there was a section where we went from phase 1 into phase 2, and then we're back into phase 1 now. So once we went into phase 2, we did see an increase in the amount of people trying to look for places. So it tends to correlate with what is going on in the city. People want to move down here because of the lifestyle it provides. If restaurants, bars, and all the activities the city has are closed, the majority of people, why would they want to live downtown? There's no reason to. But when things started to open again, people did flock back to the city because they thought things are going to get better. We might as well move back to Toronto right now. Things are starting to open. Then we went back to phase 1, and it happened again. People paused. Now, something else that happened is typically the highest amount of rental turnover happens in the summer, and it's because you'd rather move in the summer. So a lot of people's leases were coming to an end. So if your lease was coming to an end in the summer in August or September, which most people, that's when they typically tend to start and end a lease, then they'd eventually look for a new place now, given that the prices have gone down.
All right. So now that the effects of COVID are getting a little more clear, would you say post-pandemic, right now, are you more team furnished or team unfurnished?
So I do like the idea of a furnished rental. I actually own a furnished one downtown. I can tell you that the way I got a tenant this round was taking out the furniture. I basically gave them the option, you can have furniture or not furniture. They prefer to not have the furniture. So I took it out for them. They were giving me the exact same amount as if they would have kept the furniture. So you've got to be able to be flexible. If you have a furnished rental, it needs to be nice furniture. You can't just throw in whatever you didn't want to put in your new place, because people will pick a place based on nice furniture if it is furnished. Now, if you do it the right way, you can get more money on it. However, right now, most people don't want furnished. It's just the trend.
Oh, wow. Okay. So we conducted a poll during this for this insight. We asked the audience, are they team furnished or team unfurnished during this time? And 43% of the audience have voted furnished, and 57% of the audience have voted unfurnished. So I see that there's more support for an unfurnished rentals. Sometimes it comes, I guess, like you said, it provides more flexibility for the tenants to bring their own furnitures and everything. So we actually.
What I would say is for those 43%, come contact me. I have some furnished places that need to go.
Oh, okay. That's good. I wanted to make a mention that from a comment made from one of the audience member. It was stated that I was 100% team furnished pre-pandemic. The majority of my rentals were short-term vacation rentals in the downtown core. So I guess that coincides with what you were talking about with Airbnb and short-term rentals. From your prediction, do you think it'll pick up soon if the phase ones and phase two in Toronto COVID restrictions get lifted?
I think this conversation can get me to go on a rant for hours, but what I would say is the moment that the vaccine starts to circulate, the moment businesses start to open again, the moment immigration is allowed again, I do see the city is going to recover. It will.
Okay.
That's what's going to end up happening. But until that comes to light, it's going to take some time. So definitely if you have a bunch of rentals right now, it is not the time to hold out for the highest price. I would say
Okay.
drop it to a reasonable price that's going to get you a tenant now.
That's interesting. I'm sure we're going to dive into this a bit more when we hit our predictions for 2021. So it's good. Our next insight is to be discussed is most impacted areas in the GTA, Scarborough, Brampton, Vaughan, and Richmond Hill. These four areas, statistics have shown that they were hit the hardest. So Brampton, for one bed furnished, was minus 27% versus the stats in 2019. And one bed unfurnished, there was a minus 13.7% versus their 2019 stats. Scarborough also saw a minus 25.6% and 15.6% for one bed unfurnished. And Vaughan and Richmond Hill also saw a decline of 17%. For these three areas in the GTA, why are they being hit the hardest, Elena?
So I'm going to speak from experience. This isn't the rule that's going to apply to everything, but I am going to speak on my own personal clients. The ones that we're looking to rent in those areas, we're looking to rent in those areas based on price. So they saw that it was a little bit cheaper to get into those markets. They usually came with parking. If I spent a little bit less on rent, I can afford to buy a little quicker. I'm okay with the commute. That tended to be the conversation I would have with people renting in those areas. Now, what happens when the downtown core turns into those prices? Why wouldn't they want to move closer to the core with the anticipation that once things open up again, I have a place in downtown Toronto that's covered under rent control and that's closer to my work? So I would say that has contributed a little bit as well, but definitely it's opportunity. If you can find places to move to, that's what you're doing. And a lot of people, I would say, in Mississauga, Vaughan, and Richmond Hill have converted into buyers in this market right now.
Okay. All right. Perfect. And just wanted to discuss about the poll results again. Now that 22% of the audience have voted furnished and 78% of the audience voted unfurnished now for post-pandemic. So that's interesting, a big shift in from furnished to unfurnished from the earlier poll. All right, so moving to our fifth insight, there's been a slight rebound in December for only two areas, Mississauga, Vaughan, and Richmond Hill. Mississauga, only furnished rentals saw a slight increase compared to December, which was a 4.5% increase compared to 2019. And for Vaughan and Richmond Hill, both furnished and unfurnished saw slight increases in December compared to 2019. Furnished saw an increase of 8.2% compared to 2019, and unfurnished saw a 0.6% compared to 2019. For these two areas, what can be, for these slight rebounds, what can it be accounted for or attributed to?
So we are heading into the holidays. Usually during this time, people tend to look for bigger places. So if I'm looking for a bigger place, where would I look? If I wanted the best price possible, I'd look in those areas. So if they're flexible with moving around, or if they're looking for an actual house, which a lot of renters have been looking for now, house rentals, I would say, are doing a lot better right now than condos are doing. So in Mississauga, Vaughan, Richmond Hill, there's a lot of houses for rent. And of course, why would I live in a condo if I can afford to live in a house and rent it? So I can see why those have increased slightly. Also, it has to do with visitors. Some condos have put restrictions on if you can have guests over, and they are monitoring it quite thoroughly depending on the building. So if you're getting into the holidays, you know you're going to have family over, would you rather be in a house where you actually have space? Or would you rather be in a strict condo where they're going to monitor every single guest that comes into your house?
Okay. So I'm guessing, staying up to date on rental insights is going to be very important, and that's what we're trying to offer for audience, for renters, even for landlords and realtors and property managers. these statistics can prove to provide the necessary insight for better judgment to be made, especially when listing and property. So liv.rent, we want to provide these information in detail for users like yourself and for the general public. So Elena, I have a quick comment that an audience made. Voted team unfurnished post-pandemic, but I'm just going to read what the user has typed. I am now in the process of transitioning my short-term vacation rental to long-term rental, although my previous furniture does come in handy for staging listing photos. Oh, that's a comment. So
what I would say is leave it furnished, but have on the listing. So whoever you have representing yourself, or if you need help, let me know. I'm sure they'll link my contact info somewhere on this webinar. But
yes.
What I would say is leave it furnished and put in the comments that you're open to having it unfurnished. That way you touch both markets.
Okay, that's perfect. And yes, Elena's contact information will be provided at the end of the webinar. And for all members of audience, if you have questions, you guys can definitely contact her directly later on too. All right, so our last insight. Multi-bedroom apartments have seen the largest drop in rental prices. Furnished 3 bedrooms dropped 27% compared to 2019. 2 bedrooms have dropped 22%. 1 bedroom have dropped around 13%. Unfurnished 3 bedrooms have dropped almost 18% compared to 2019. And 2 bedrooms have dropped 14%, and I see on the chart there it says 1 bedroom have dropped roughly 3.2%. As we talked earlier, Elena, you seem to see, we're seeing a different trend than the data. Can you dive a bit deeper on what you see from your personal experience happening in the market?
So it's understandable was being rented to 3 different people. So there was very much a roommate mentality. Now, if you were living with 3 people pre-pandemic, it was pretty much okay. You're at work 99% of your day. It's fine. You go home, you sleep. It's okay to live with multiple people. But what happens when you're all work from home in a 3-bedroom unit or in a 3-bedroom house? You're climbing on top of each other constantly. You're all on Zoom meetings at the same time. It's very hard to work. Now, once you see that the prices for 1 bedrooms have decreased or the prices for 2 bedrooms have decreased, why wouldn't you move into a 1 bedroom now? Because it's closer to the price that you're paying for your 3-bedroom unit. So if I was in a 3-bedroom and splitting the rent between us 3 and we were paying, let's say $1,200 a month each, or $1,000 a month, we'll make it easy. We were each paying $1,000 a month. So if we were paying $1,000 a month each, and now you can find a 1-bedroom unit for $1,600, why wouldn't you move? So pre-pandemic, it was hard to find something that you actually liked living in for a price that you were willing to pay. So you went into that roommate mentality. What I am seeing, though, is that my 2-bedroom listings are getting a lot more action than anything I have that's small. So studios, 1 bedroom, junior 1 bedroom, stuff like that are a little bit harder to move right now. But I am seeing an increase in 2 bedrooms, in 1+ dens, because the mentality is if I'm work from home into the foreseeable future, why wouldn't I work from home in a place that can accommodate it? So for couples, they're moving into 1 bedroom plus dens or 2 bedrooms and using one as an office. It's very common. And for a landlord, you're getting a lot more security because instead of relying on one person's income, you're relying on 2 living in your place. So it's a little bit easier for you. And I'll get into that later, how to qualify a tenant too. If anyone has questions, feel free to put it in the comments and I can answer any questions you have.
No, that's perfect. All right, so moving forward, we've completed all our insights from the data we've collected. And before we move on to the more exciting part about the 2021 predictions, we want to conduct a quick poll for our audience members. And our poll question right now is, what's your 2021 rental investment goal plan? Let us know in this live chat if even how the pandemic may have even changed this. So we will again reveal the poll results later on. So moving forward, let's go into our first 2021 prediction. So first prediction, renters will still be living away from city centers in 2021. What do you think about this, Elena?
It will depend on how fast they can circulate the vaccine. Like I said, when they opened up restaurants and had people eating outside, people started to move back to the city. People like having things to do. So do I think that people will continue to live outside the city? Temporarily, yes. Long term, no. I see people coming back.
Oh, for sure. And just on the topic, how long in the foreseeable future do you think? I mean, besides, let's just say if the vaccine is ready and everybody is vaccinated by end of 2021, do you think there's going to be a steady price increase back into the city center market? I'm talking mostly in the downtown Toronto core.
Look, it's going to take time. It's going to take time to come back to the way that the rental market was pre-pandemic. It will, especially with the influx of inventory. And who knows if people even feel comfortable listing their properties on Airbnb right now, or if their building is going to allow it anymore. Some buildings have banned it. So, for example, I have some people that invested in buildings solely because they could Airbnb in those buildings. Well, what happens if the building decides to take a vote and ban Airbnb? Mm-hmm. You can no longer do it. You have to turn to long-term rental market. So definitely we're going to see a shift eventually with the vaccine coming around. I know some tech industry companies, because I work with quite a few, either renters that are relocating into tech startup companies or with them investing into properties. So I can tell you that eventually they will all start coming back. The problem with them though is the majority of them have given up commercial rentals. And the reason behind that was because they've started to adapt the live from home first method. And I don't think it will last forever. I do think people need to be socialized and go into the office and have some sort of work from home balance where they can actually shut off their computer and not be seeing their office. So eventually people will start going back to work. It will take some time, but eventually when the vaccine does circulate, we will see an increase in what's going on in Toronto, at least movement wise.
Well, that's interesting. And on the topic of Airbnb, because I noticed that there's a lot of short-term landlords looking for short-term rentals, even from Vancouver. Are there city bylaws that in Vancouver and in British Columbia, minimum rent is 1 month? Is that the same in Toronto?
So it depends on the building. Some buildings have a strict 3-month period. Some have 6 months. Some buildings, though, the ones that allow Airbnb, some buildings have even regulated it in their building where landlords can pay a certain amount each month and the building manages their Airbnb for them, which is pretty great.
I'm guessing that they will take a cut of the profit?
Yes, they do take a cut, but you don't have to visit the property at all. They arrange for a cleaning staff after the person has left. They hand the person the keys, so they very much automated it. But what I can tell you is I tell my clients not to invest in buildings that allow Airbnb and short-term rental. And there's a reason behind it. Those are the buildings that got hit the hardest through the pandemic. You want to invest in buildings that are primarily owner-occupied. So when something like the pandemic or something like this hits, where a bunch of inventory floods the market, you want to be in a building that doesn't have a lot of rentals, not 27. In a building that has tons. And it does happen. I have 2 units right now in a building and there's about 38 units for rent in that building. That is madness. You wouldn't even go visit them all. So in a building like that, you're competing with whoever can drop the rent the lowest, which you don't want to be in a competition with. You don't want to be who can drop the rent even lower than the last person so we get a tenant first.
I mean, it's great when you're driving up the price, but when it comes the other way, that's not great for landlords. All right, so
definitely not.
For the poll 4 that we did earlier on what are the audience 2021 rental investment goals and plans, 43% of the audience have voted move from short-term to long-term rentals. And there was a comment from one audience member. The comment is, will investing in neighborhoods outside of downtown core in 2021, still close by such as Cannery District and Riverdale? Now, Elena, do you have any comments on those neighborhoods?
So Cannery District, Riverdale, is actually, I would say, one of the better areas to invest in. They are super cute, trendy areas. I do see a lot of people ask me to go live there. So it's not an uncommon trend. You will get renters. That area has slowly been slowly been developing even more. So it is a very cute place to live. I actually just moved someone down there last week. So, and they wanted that area. They were very specific. So most people that come and look for a place to rent have a specific area in mind to rent in. What I would say where I like to invest in, and my prediction I would say, is the Junction area will eventually look like Queen West. That's what I think will eventually happen in Junction. I know the company I work for is also planning to develop there. Also the East End. So the East End of Toronto, although not very desirable right now, I personally wouldn't live there right now. It's just my personal preference. I don't think it's as trendy or hip, and definitely it still needs to gentrify. But
when we say East End, are we talking about Scarborough?
No. I'm still talking downtown core.
Oh, downtown.
I'm talking in between. Before you hit Canary District and Riverdale, there's an in-between little area. That area is getting developed. So there's tons of developers that have bought in those areas in the east where you can actually make a huge profit in the long term because you're buying when the market is technically not that desirable. But long term, once that market starts to pick up and once developers are done developing there, it's going to be crazy. Another area where, like, my favorite street in Toronto is Wellington. I know a lot of people share this idea that I have too, is Wellington will be the New Yorkville. It will be where all the new school money goes. The Well is getting put up right now. The Well price per square foot before pandemic, they're selling pre-construction was at $14.50 a square foot. There's King Toronto that was selling pre-construction pre-COVID at $1,800 a square foot. Those are insane prices. So if you're buying in those areas, you already know that a bunch of people invested in these buildings at those premiums. Right now, you can buy in Toronto for under $1,000 a square foot in resale. So why wouldn't you try and get into the market and wait for those to get developed? Wait for it to go up. The Well is going to be a luxury shopping center. There's going to be luxurious brands all over the place. It's a mix between commercial and residential. That's going to transform the area. Then also, King Toronto is being...
Oh, sorry. I was just going to inject. I'm guessing that, like, based on your insight on this area, that's probably going to be, it's going to be easy to find renters too, or moving into that area. Would you say?
Definitely. People like living in King West. It tends to be the trend, especially the target demographic that you're looking for when you're looking for renters. People are thinking financial district, King West, Queen West, if they're a little bit more trendy. But those are the areas that where renters typically like to go. Okay.
Oh, well, perfect. I hope that answers our audience members' comment there. And again, if you have further questions, Elena's contact information will be presented at the end of this webinar. So feel free to contact her directly. She'll be more than happy to answer your questions. All right. So our next, moving forward now, second prediction for 2021. We're going to continue to see a surplus of rental supply throughout 2021. And Elena, what's your comment on that prediction?
What I would say is you need to get a lot more creative when it comes to listing a property. If you are working with a real estate agent or with liv.rent or whatever you're doing, you need to do all the bells and whistles. It's not enough to throw it onto MLS and expect a tenant to just fall into your lap. For something right now like COVID, which is circulating, what I would say is a lot of people have reverted to virtual showings. Even for rentals, there's 360 tours for them right now, which is great. Even if you walked in with your camera, filmed a video of the property and listed it with the property, that helps. Adding a floor plan to your listing, that helps. People don't want to go and waste time on properties they can't see all the information on. They only want to see what they know works for them. So definitely that plays a role. What I would also say is if you're looking to invest into the market and you're worried about how much inventory is for rent right now, I would say is you have to make a strategic move. So again, whoever you're working with needs to know what is going to rent the quickest. And that comes from knowing the rental market inside out. You need to know how much rental inventory is in these areas before you go and invest into a property, or how many rentals are in that building. That will help you long term.
Well, that's perfect. And understanding that information, it will give you an edge, especially when you're competing with other landlords looking to rent their properties. And with an increase in rental supply, competition for sure will be that much higher. And I think liv.rent does provide the perfect information you'll need. I mean, we separate units in each building, so you can see directly how many units are being listed for rentals, how many units in that specific building, as well as what's the average median price that's being rented for. And, understanding these stats will definitely give you a better understanding on how to rent your unit better. So third prediction, let's move forward, is continue to see a boost in incentives. So I guess that question is falling on landlords being creative in trying to attract their tenants. Have you seen, what kind of incentives have you seen so far, Elena, for landlords to attract tenants faster or to get them to come in to see their unit?
So there's definitely been a lot of incentives that landlords have been throwing around. Some of it is a month free, 6 months at a discounted rate, whatever it may be. They're trying to entice the tenant to come move in quicker. So what I would say to any landlord that's thinking of offering some sort of incentive, to benefit yourself the highest, I would recommend that you try and get a tenant to agree to a 6-month discount or even to a year discount. That way the real rent is actually higher. So for example, if I want to set the price at $1,900, but I know everyone around the area is listing it for $1,850, I would tell a tenant they can have the place for a year at $1,800 discounted, but the real rent is $1,900. So the moment the year ends, the rent is actually $1,900. I can increase the rent based on that amount, not on your discounted amount. Now, it benefits the tenant because they get a discount for the year. They basically save $600. Benefits you because if in a year they want to move out, you can jack up the rent based on whatever the market is at that time. And you know that if the tenant does stay, you're not stuck at a very low rate. You're at least stuck at something that's a little bit more comfortable.
Okay, that's actually very, I'm going to apply that knowledge into how I'm going to be dealing with my tenants for my investment property. So like I said, I learned something from you every time we speak.
What I would say too is a good tenant goes a long way. Now, if you have someone that's good on paper and they're offering you less on rent, I would say take it. And the reason I would say that is because how much would you pay to get rid of a bad tenant versus how much would you pay to have a great tenant live in your unit? You don't want the headaches. It is very hard to get rid of tenants in Toronto. It is. It's just the reality. Now, if you have a great tenant, you're more willing to negotiate on price because you know long term it's going to cost you less when they move out.
I want to bring something up that last time we spoke on the phone that you gave me, you taught me something was, I mentioned to you in British Columbia, there's a security deposit. Usually it's half a month's rent, just to protect the landlord if the tenant, say, damages the property or the a pet has, damages the walls, whatnot. You mentioned to me Toronto does not have a security deposit policy. Can you elaborate on this just for our audience from British Columbia?
So in Ontario, we have this thing called the Ontario Standard Lease. Everything written in it is what covers you by law. Everything else that a landlord can add to the contract, everything else, if it conflicts with the Ontario Standard Lease, it's no longer valid. So for example, a lot of people will write on listings, no pets allowed. Landlords are going to hate me for saying this, but in Ontario, you can legally move in, not have a pet, all of a sudden get a pet, and the landlord can't do anything. It's unfortunate, but it's true. What I typically tend to do on listings is I write no pets allowed. If they tell me they have a pet, I already like them a bit more because at least they were honest about it and called and said, hey, is your client going to be open to us having a pet? At that point, I'm usually like, send me a picture. Are you okay with you covering any damages that the pet has? Typically, if you level with them as a human, they tend to be better. But if they are kind of lying to you and coming into your place and have a pet, it's not the greatest situation. Another thing I would say is the other question you had was about deposit for damages. Legally on the Ontario Standard Lease, it says you cannot collect any other deposits. The only deposit we can collect is last month's rent and a key deposit. Now, the key deposit cannot exceed the amount that it would cost to replace the key. Now, again, some landlords have gone a little creative and said, well, replace the whole entire lock is $300. So what would I do if I need to replace the whole entire lock? Unfortunately, that's the risk you run when you are a landlord. Again, we tried the best of our ability to vet tenants properly, and I'm very glad to say that I have not run into a lot of issues with tenants that I've selected, and it's because of that. Now, what I would say also for the damage deposit is if you collect one, which they have been in contracts. I've done contracts where I've put damage deposits because the landlord wouldn't accept my tenants without one, and the tenants wanted the place. So what we did as percent, because clients are professional investors, we're doing 4% on the deposit, interest on you holding it. So fine, you can have the deposit. If anything gets damaged, we'll cover it based on the deposit. But as long as we're in here, you're paying us 4% on that deposit. So that was something that they agreed to, and that got them away with asking for a deposit. But technically, a deposit's not legal. You don't have to agree to it. If they moved in after a week and decided they want to mess up with the landlord and just say, I want my deposit back, legally, the landlord has to give the deposit back. They can go to the landlord-tenant board and request the deposit back. You have to give it back. You're not allowed to ask for one. So it definitely makes things a little bit more challenging. What I would say is if you have a rental property, 2 weeks before your tenant moves out, or even the moment they give notice, go inspect the property. See if it's in a condition that you're okay with. And the most you can do is say that, look, I'm not going to give you a good reference. So when you go to apply to places, don't put me down. You're not going to get a good place unless you fix X, Y, and Z. But I would say you get more done with honey than you do with vinegar. Treat your tenants like gold, and you're going to get away with a lot more. Like I have tenants that I don't need 24-hour notice to go view properties for them. Mm-hmm. And that's because I've built a relationship with them that they're like, Elena, 2 hours, all I need. Just let me know. I'll step out for the showing. Those are the tenants you want. And those tenants want to work with you because you have this connection with them. So that's something I would say.
Okay, perfect. So let's move on to our third prediction. Actually, I just wanted to mention an audience comment from Diana. Get a tenant to agree to a 6-month or 1-year discounted rate. That's a good idea to lease my unit. Thanks for your sharing, Elena. So, okay. Glad that Diana, you got some good advice. All right. So third prediction: continue to see a boost in. Oh, whoops. I think I already mentioned that. Okay. So fourth prediction: broad adoption of technology with rental process. So I'm guessing we're going to be talking about virtual tours, live streaming, Matterport. I think you touched upon that earlier, Elena. So. Do you see an increase in better use of technology to streamline the rental process in the near future?
I definitely do, and it definitely helps. I've had people call me and say, well, I don't want to come and see the property until I see what it looks like. And you send them a quick video, they decide whether or not they want to come. It saves you time and it saves them time. So you're only showing it to people that will actually place offers. So it definitely does help.
Perfect. All right. I just want to quickly mention that we're almost to we're actually at our last prediction. And if you have questions for Elena, please submit them in our live chat and we'll get to them right afterwards. And also I want to mention this is your last chance to enter into our giveaway. So please complete the actions for additional entries. And one last quick poll would be, what was the biggest learning curve for you as a landlord PM in 2020? So, Elena, do you want to elaborate a little on that poll question too, on your personal experience?
So I'm going to touch on a subject that I'm sure if you are a landlord or if you're a tenant, you've kind of been through this before. Now, I do usually post what happens with problematic tenants or what happens with great experienced tenants on my Instagram. So if you want to go take a look, you can take a look at some stories that I've gone through. Now in 2020, I would say for my own unit, I ran into an issue. Now I bought this unit with my boyfriend. We co-own it. And I saw the application in front of me. I read through the whole entire application. I turned to him and I said, listen, if I was recommending this person to my clients, I would tell them not to take it. And he turned around and told me, you know what, let's give him a chance. How do you predict that that ended with? So while he was in the unit, it was perfectly fine. He decided he wanted to move in a girlfriend. Okay, no problem. You want to move in your girlfriend to my unit? Go ahead, not an issue. He then asked when COVID hit for a discount in rent. Let's see how the market continues to go, and we'll talk about something that's reasonable. He asked me for a discount that wasn't reasonable. I told him, don't worry about it. I'm happy to help you find a new place, or if you're looking for a new place, go look for a new place. No problem at all. I went and inspected the unit. There was boxes everywhere. It was definitely not in the cleanest condition. Now, my response to them was, as long as you have everything clean, I will give you your key deposit, no problems, like not an issue at all. By the way, you can't withhold key deposits, but of course I said this to them. Now, they went to leave. I went in to grab the keys from them, and I looked at the unit, and the unit was filthy. I gave him a brand new unit, fully renovated. Yep, this happened. It happens to people. Look, this is the risk you run when you're a landlord. It's not, you're never going to get the most amazing tenants 10 out of 10 times. As much as you try, there's always going to be the one or two that upset you, especially when you own multiple properties. It's going to happen. It's bound to happen. Some people look amazing on paper and they turn out awful. Some people look horrible on paper and they turn out to be the best tenants ever because you gave them a chance. So it does happen. I went and saw the unit. I would say that it was filthy. I hired my cleaning lady to come in. She cleaned it, even brought my handyman in. He fixed it. And then we got a tenant in the exact same day. So it's fine, like it happens. But what I would say is if you have a bad feeling about a tenant, go with your gut. I vet tenants for appliances. I call the tenant directly and I ask them questions. I call all the references. I would say don't cheap out on calling references. You would be surprised how much info people can tell you. You'd be surprised. Past landlords, like the one that they're currently living in, you're going to get maybe basic information, but if they're a horrible tenant, why would they tell you they're a horrible tenant? They want them out. But the landlord before that might tell you something interesting. If you're finding that the tenant is having problems with every single landlord that they've ever had, that's an issue. If you're finding that maybe a friend of theirs let it slip out that they're a bit messy, or a friend of theirs let it slip out that they do have a pet that they never told you about, let me tell you, it happens. When I talk to someone on the phone, when I talk to one of their references, I usually throw in a pet and see if they react. So I throw them off their game. I do. I'll pick up the phone, I'll call them, and I'll say like, yeah, we'll ask them some basic questions, and I'll say, they only have the 2 cats, right? And I pause. I do this every time. And they'll either turn around and be like, no, they actually have a dog, or no, I don't think they have any pets. And they'll sound very confused. Like, why do you think that? Because what's stopping them from calling their friends that they put down as references and saying, hey, don't tell them that I have a pet.
Yeah.
There's nothing stopping them from doing that. So you kind of need to be a little bit more creative with questions and typically ask for things that they wouldn't necessarily say. Like, talk to them like they're your friends. What else I would say is
what you will do for your tenants, for your clients that are looking for suitable tenants, you'll have to actually do all this due diligence to actually find them. You'll never know whether they're perfect, but at least a qualified tenant.
You need to find someone as perfect as possible. That's the rule. I don't rent to people with credit scores under 680. I don't. Even in the 600s, I question it. I like them 700 and above. Credit score does play a role. I would say don't let tenants pull their own credit. You have it pulled. So I have the luxury at my office that we can pull people's credits. I pull it for every single one of my landlords. I don't care what they came to me with. I will pull their credit. Usually, and I've seen faked credit reports. I've seen fake employment letters. I've seen fake T4s. Like, you would be surprised. And the credit report looks legit. But when I pull it, it's a completely different number. There's no point in me even looking at the explain it to me. Why is your credit the way it is? So I had a couple once that they were getting married and they put everything on their cards so they could get the points. So their utilization looked very, very high. I had a client that was getting divorced and because of their divorce, it affected their credit. Like, they need to be able to explain why their credit is the way it is. I wouldn't accept a person that I can see that they've been late on payments. It's not worth the headache.
Yeah, and that's what, to tie that into our liv.rent platform, what we have is called the Liv Score. And Liv Score is powered by Equifax, and basically it provides an even more detailed picture than the standard credit score is, because it encompasses even the financial documents, their ability to for rent rate to pay the rent, as well as all T4s like you mentioned. So every landlord or any verified tenant that completes their profile that has a Liv Score will give a landlord a detailed picture to the tenants, the applicants' financial background. All right. So
what I would also say,
sorry.
I'm going to say one more point. What I would also say is Google is your best friend. Google everyone.
Oh, okay.
You would be surprised whose LinkedIn profile doesn't match their employment letter.
Oh.
Look at their Instagram. Are they in a bunch of party shots? Do they have a dog in their Instagram? Does their place look clean in the background? Google everyone. You become FBI when you're a landlord. You need to know. Or you have to have a representative that will search for you.
That's good to hear. No, that's actually funny. No, we'll do some snooping later on. I'm going to snoop my tenants now that you mentioned it. So moving forward, our giveaway will be closing soon. So please see live chat for instructions on how to enter if you haven't yet. And last prediction, Toronto will remain a renter's market in 2021. With a constant supply of new condos being added to the market, especially studio and one bedrooms, which account for 61% of new units. This statistic is according to the Globe and Mail. What is your insight on this prediction, Elena?
So there is a reason why studios and one bedrooms have so much inventory and why developers tend to build studio and one bedrooms. Developers need to fund their projects. Now, who are the people that like to buy in pre-construction? Most of them are investors. They're not usually end users. Now, would you buy the most expensive property if you're planning to use it as a rental? No. You'd buy an entry-level unit that you can rent out for maximum rent. If you buy a unit that's $400,000 and you can rent it out for $1,800, that's a lot better than if you could buy a unit for $650 and only get $2,300 out of it for rent. So why wouldn't you go for the lowest on the totem pole? But again, based on what is going on right now, this has never happened before where COVID has hit. We have noticed that one bedroom plus dens or at two bedrooms, they've been doing better in the rental market, even though they are more expensive. Now, in the future, when Toronto does hit New York prices, which I know some people will disagree with me, but eventually I do see that happening. What will happen is people will not be able to afford to live alone. That will be a luxury in itself. So pre-COVID, you'd see a one-bedroom unit. You could probably find a very nice one for around $2,400, $2,500. You could see a clear vision that in the next 5 years, 6 years, a one-bedroom that looks like that would be $3,000. So what would a two-bedroom go for? Could I not rent out a two-bedroom for $4,000? Each tenant pays $2,000 each. Sounds plausible, and that's the cheaper option. So due to COVID, I would say if you're looking to get into the market, you might want to explore a little bit of bigger units just because you're going to have an easier time finding a tenant. But yeah.
That's good insight to know for the future. All right, so thank you, Elena. This wraps up our predictions. And don't worry, if you missed any of our insights, we'll be sending all viewers a full report along with the graphs that we shared in the presentation. And also, just want to mention that the giveaway contest is now closed. So we'll dive into the Q&A session first and then announce our 3 winners afterwards. So stay with us throughout this Q&A. There's actually a couple of questions that the audience members have posed for you, Elena. And I also want to wrap up our presentation with the results from our last poll. The question was, what was the biggest learning curve for you as a landlord in 2020? And the audience have voted, 54% of the audience voted getting creative with marketing my listings. And that's perfect. I mean, from what the audience and from how Elena has explained it, creative marketing is definitely needed to push your property to get it rented. So right now I am just scrolling through the questions. All right, You ready for this, Elena? Some Q&A
as ready as I can be.
All right. So here's a question from Diana. How's the rental market in Vancouver compared to Toronto? Is it worth to buy a condo in Vancouver or Toronto? What do you think is a better investment, Toronto or Vancouver? I know you're not a realtor in Vancouver, but what's your trend? What do you think, Elena? Have you seen a steady increase in people shifting towards the West Coast, or still remaining on the in the GTA area?
So what I would have to say is it's very hard for me to touch on that topic just because I don't work primarily in Vancouver. I can give you all the stats in the world about Toronto. What I would say is Toronto is very solid because of how many companies choose to start here. And I know the same could be said by Vancouver. But what I look at when I say that is how many companies I help with relocation. And that gives me the hope and the ideals that Toronto is a very good city to invest in. In general, I invest in here. I had the opportunity to invest in Vancouver as well. It's a little too far to fly back and forth if I needed to go check in on something. I can say that I've even looked in Nova Scotia. I've looked in a bunch of areas around the GTA to invest in. If it's a good opportunity, it's a good opportunity. If you know what you can potentially get out of it, it will make that opportunity even stronger. So if you know in that area, the average rental rates are this price, there's a lack of inventory in that area. So for example, I just helped a client of mine buy a property in London, Ontario. London, Ontario's house prices range. You can buy a house for $300,000. You can buy a house for $2 million. I helped my client buy a house for $400K, an actual house. Now in Toronto, that's kind of a shocking price for a house. In Vancouver, I'm sure it's shocking for there too because I have been to Vancouver. Yep. But that $400,000 house, we ended up renting for $2,700 in this market. What does that say? In certain areas, it's still a good investment and they're getting cash flow right now. That client, the same one, I went to London last weekend, we bought another one for him. It's still doing well. So it really has to do with the area and the opportunity that it comes forward to you. So if you're looking for something that you want to invest in and you want a certain type of future, like you want to have X amount of properties in the core, you want to have X amount of properties that cash flow right away, that is what dictates where you should buy.
And London, Ontario, I mean, my parents went to Western Ontario there. So, I mean, there are a lot of universities, colleges there. So I'm guessing that area will still remain hot in the future.
Believe it or not, I thought, and I told my client this, I'm like, we're in the pandemic. My brother goes to Western because he's at home now. He's not renting down there. He's not. But the reality of the fact is anyone that's in a medical profession still has classes to take in class. So who are the tenants you're attracting? AAA tenants. You're looking at second, third year students that are very focused on their studies. So it was great for him. It was a great investment. I look at it all the time.
Wow, that's actually a very good insight. the renter demographic, Elena has a good understanding of even that. So hope that answers your question, Diana. So next question is from Evanard. Elena, how much is the average rent in Toronto? How much was the last tenancy you helped sign?
So I would say the average rent right now in Toronto is about $1,900. The last one I signed was for a property on Queens Quay, and it was it was a really good deal. He got it for $1,650, all inclusive. It's also because I was the one representing him. So the last one I represented the tenant, he got $1,650. The last one I represented the landlord for got about $21. Yeah.
All right. And speaking of, just add a little touch onto that topic. In Vancouver or in British Columbia, it's not often that we see realtors or representation for tenants to find representation when looking for a property. Usually the tenant just applies with the landlord or the property manager listing the property directly. What's the benefit of that in Toronto, and why do people find representation in Toronto for this? They're not buying a house, but representation for renting.
There's so many options in Toronto. There's so many. You don't even know what you want until you're here and looking. There are buildings that I'd avoid. There's a building that I'd invest in. There's so many options. Why wouldn't you choose to use a realtor to represent you when you don't have to pay them? The landlord is the one that pays. So when a landlord lists a property, realtors charge 1 month rent. They split that between the agent that brings them the tenant and themselves. So it costs you 1 month rent to have someone actively be searching for your tenant, vetting them to see if they're proper tenants. That's all it costs you. Is that worth it? For most people, it is. In Toronto, it's very hard to find a very qualified tenant just by listing your property yourself. And it's because the qualified tenants are taking advantage of using agents. Because why wouldn't they? If I was a lawyer, if I was a doctor, if I was an engineer, I don't have time to look online for all the best properties. I want to sit down with an agent. I want a 5-minute call. I want to tell them exactly what I'm looking for, then book 5 properties in 2 hours, and I have my home. That's it. I have it down to a science. That's all you have to do. So there's a reason why tenants choose to use realtors, and it's because A, it's free. They have insider knowledge. So I'm not sure how many of you are from Toronto, but there's certain pockets of the city that I don't want to live in. I would not buy in those buildings. I try and avoid them. So City Place, I know some people will have good feelings about them, some people won't. City Place is one of those areas that if you talk to anyone that's not trying to sell you something, we'll call it shitty place. That's what it is. I don't let my clients rent on those buildings. The only time I bring clients to those buildings is if they cannot afford anything else. Like the option is you find a rental in Toronto, you go there. If you're buying, we'll look a little bit further out of the core. You don't want to own in one of those buildings. That's my mentality. I've gotten locked in elevators. I've gotten elevators that don't work. I've gotten plumbing issues in the units. Like it's just not worth the headache to invest in those buildings. Why would I stick a good tenant into those units? You have to also understand real estate's a relationship building business. I have clients that come to me looking for a rental, and then the next year they're buying with me. They're buying with me because they know that round 1 of us looking at places, I didn't look to how can I make the most money from you. I looked, how can I benefit your best interest possible? So in the future, you want to use me again and again. And it's the same way between building landlord relationships, and it's the same way when they buy, sell, rent. Real estate is one of those industries that you have to be relationship driven, not commission driven. So if you're always looking in the best interest of your client has no reason to ever buy, sell, rent with any other agent. Mm-hmm. So that's how I've kind of built the brand that I've built and been able to work with as many people as I work with. And the majority of my business, I would say right now, is referral based because they know that I'm looking for them to save money so they can afford the future that they want to have in the distance. And the same thing with my landlords. My landlords want the most rent possible. That's what I help them do. The tenants want the least amount of rent possible so they can save the most money. That's the trend.
Well, it's perfect. That's great to hear. All right. So I'm just going to, as time is ticking, I just want to move to our last couple more questions. Question from Liang. Pros and cons on renting in a condo versus house. Are there any safety and security concerns I should be aware of?
So personally, I like living in a condo. I do. You have a security in the front door. It's a lot easier to get in and out. A house is a little bit less secure. Anyone walking down the street can knock on the door. That's typically how it is. I would say if you're a young single female, I'd live in a condo. That's where the trend would go. Now, if you guys are a couple, I would say go ahead, live in a house. You have at least another person there that can be there if you need anything. Now, because of COVID, there have been restrictions placed on certain condos. So if you are someone that likes to have your friends over, wants to have open space, doesn't want to be in elevators with multiple people, then house is the right way for you to go right now. If you're okay with being in an elevator with more than one person, if you're okay with having a little bit of a smaller space and not maybe having outdoor space, condo's the right option, but it's all dependent on you yourself. So that can actually be a conversation we can have later. If you want to send me a message, we can hop on a call and I can discuss what option might fit you better.
Perfect. And one last question is from Hazel. And where can I find this data? Is there a PDF I can download? Or I guess that's a question for me. Everyone here today will be receiving a downloadable package via email, including a full report with all of our data insights in this webinar. So If you missed something or want to go back on any of the information that we were discussing, don't worry, we will be sending you an email with everything that has been discussed. And last question, another question from Diana. If tenants can't complete one-year term agreement, what happens with it? Will the landlord give tenants a hard time moving out, or how can tenants get rid of these problems? So I'm guessing what happens, Elena, for when tenants can't complete 1 year?
What is the question would have to lead to what is the reason why you cannot complete the year? And is it because now you're noticing that prices have gone down and you regret signing for the price that you signed for? If that's the case, I'm telling you right now, as a landlord myself, I wouldn't be the happiest person ever with you. Would they give you the best recommendation? Probably not. But if it's for something legit, so for example, you have to go home because a family member is not doing too well and you want to spend time with them instead. Some landlords will give you a break. Technically, though, you're in a year-long lease. It's a binding contract. You're in it for the long term, unless you kind of strike a deal with the landlord. I've had one client in the past where they wanted out of their lease because now they're work from home. So the way we dealt it with the landlord was they paid for my real estate fees and they paid for the difference in rent. So, for example, when they were renting it, it was $2,800. Now the price has dropped to $2,400. They paid the difference for the remaining of their term, plus an additional 2 months, plus my real estate fees for them to get out of it, which I know is a lot, but in the grand scheme of it, they saved at least $4,000 in comparison to losing all of the money. So there are some pros and cons. Like, you have to talk to your landlord. It's a case-by-case basis. But for the majority of times, landlords are not just going to let you out of their lease, especially when times are like this and it's hard to find a tenant.
Interesting. And Elena, there's one more question that just popped up, and from Jordan. Jordan asks, have you run into a situation where your tenant has left the country after their lease has ended and the damages exceed the deposit?
This is the question that I would ask you. When you found this tenant, were they from the area that you're from, or were they from out of the country? If they were out of the country, you can assume that at the end of the lease, you run the risk of them leaving. You run the risk of them leaving even in the middle of your lease, especially when something like COVID hits. Why wouldn't I just pick up and leave? How are they going to find me? It does happen. Unfortunately, it sucks. I can tell you for even the one that my tenant damaged, I didn't take them to landlord-tenant board because it's way too much of my time, my energy to have to chase them down to cover the cost when I could have just fixed it and found a tenant right away. I know that's not the answer you want to hear. It's a very difficult question. Unfortunately, when they leave the country, it's very hard to find them.
Oh, that's perfect. Wow. All right. So that concludes pretty much today's webinar. I want to first thank everyone for tuning in, and then I also want to thank our special guest, Elena. I'm sure the audience has learned a lot. I have. As I said, every time I speak with her, I learn something new. So thank you, Elena, for being my lovely co-host today. And can you let us know where people can find you or how they can contact you?
Definitely. You can contact me via my email. It is ELENA at Brad, BRAD, J as in the letter, lamb as in the animal, .com. You can also just Google me. You will find my direct contact info. You will find my website. Feel free to do that as well. And I would say also social media. If you want to follow me on Instagram, follow me on Instagram. I usually provide helpful tips on what to look for, and I usually share stories once they're happening.
That is awesome. And also, you guys can see if you're using liv.rent, Elena's listings are all posted on our Toronto listings, and you guys can definitely find her available listings for you and contact her via the liv.rent chat too. So our last thing on the agenda is the winners, the giveaway winners. So there are 3 winners. The first winner is Christiana Okunade. Second winner is Sarah LaChapelle, and the third winner is Liang. I guess that's the last name, but perfect. So those are the three winners. You will be contacted by our support team and how to claim it. So that pretty much wraps up today's webinar. And I hope you guys have all learned a lot. And thank you for joining into our liv.rent webinar. We will be emailing you the exclusive full report of the 2020 Toronto rental market, as well as keep an eye out. Last week we had our first webinar, which was to do with rental scams, and this week we're doing the Toronto rental market. So, but look forward. We're going to set up more webinars to educate the tenants across the GTA area as well as Vancouver area. So, stay tuned with us, and hope to see you guys in the near future. And once more, I want to thank Elena for being my co-host today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Perfect. Bye, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Take care. Bye, Elena.
Bye.